My favorite thing about being a 6 is that I always have a mind for others as being prepared for any situation. I think that that makes me an asset to the group or to any friendship. I always like to know what's going on so that I can plan accordingly.
For those who have managed to work their way into my circle, I tend to be pretty ferociously protective of them. And when it comes to them pursuing the things in life that they want most or that matter most to them, I'm a pretty strong champion on their behalf.
One of my favorite things about being a 6 is that people can count on me. I'm hardworking, I'm reliable. Once you're a friend of mine, you're in, and I will go to the ends of the earth for you.
My favorite part about being a 6 is how risk analyzey I can be. I am a background vocalist, and I was background vocal on a tour for quite a while. My job during the day was to go around on the stage with yellow gaff tape. I would just scout out any place that potentially someone might fall, the main artist specifically, and try to keep the negative from happening. So I have an eye for what might go wrong.
My least favorite thing about being a 6 is that I have off-the-wall anxiety about most things.
I'm always in my own head. I constantly question, am I making the right decision? Am I doing the right thing? How am I going to make sure that this works? Those cause a lot of anxiety, and I've had to work through my anxieties and learn how to deal with that.
I tend to have to do some pretty elaborate mental calisthenics to move forward in a situation or pursue something that evokes anxiety in me. It takes a lot of me really evaluating the situation and weighing all the possibilities, and at the end of the day, just recognizing that some things in life are uncertain and unpredictable, and this is still something I really want, and so what do I want to do about that?
I've constantly struggled with personality types and things like that. I never seem to fit in any Myers-Briggs. I just seem to be a little of everything, and 6s can be that way. One of the fingerprints of being a 6 is kind of the back and forth, anxious and confident, thinking and doing, and fearful and courageous. Just the back and forth. And I was like, oh yeah, that does describe me.
Having the results tend to be pretty consistent. I knew I was either a 6 wing 7 or a 7 wing 6. To kind of refine that, I ultimately held up those two descriptions of those two types, and my instinct was to hold the descriptions up to essentially who I like to tell myself I am, and just the actual historical data of how I've actually constructed my life and how I tend to make decisions, and at the end of the day, what is most important to me. And it became pretty glaringly obvious that I was a 6.
I don't bounce between jobs. Stick to where I'm loyal. One of the identifiers of a 6 is that we're loyal. I was at my last job for 9 years. I'm now on my 5th year here. The ship's going down, I'm going down with it.
About a year ago, we had a scare with my youngest nanny child. It was just he and I at the house, and we did not know at the time that he had a heart condition. So he went into cardiac arrest, and I had been preparing my whole life for that catastrophic moment. I definitely saw something come out of me that was brave and strong. 6s actually go to 3 in stress, which is what's the next best thing. And that's definitely what I felt. And all of those times that I've wondered, could that ever happen? I don't want to linger on that or worry about that all the time, but I do appreciate that I was prepared and knew what to do in that moment and was able to save his life.
6s tend to catastrophize anything. So we focus sometimes on the worst situation, but it also, in social work, working with foster children and child protective services, makes me a very good social worker because I'm able to come up with several different plans at once.
6s seek security. People who belong to type 6 have tremendous gifts. They're often highly original and witty, as well as deeply loyal to the people in their lives. Their single-handed greatest asset is their emotional intelligence. Typically associated with a warm parental figure 2 or a harmony-seeking 9, 6s possess strong people skills, understanding deeply how others may feel inadequate or left out, and seeking to right that. 6s are in the head center with 5s and 7s. The common experience of the head center is fear. And sixes react to this by foreseeing the worst case scenarios. They're usually ready for everything that can go wrong. They seek guidance from authorities to deal with loss of an inner guidance, and they rebel against these authorities once they become dependent. Six people are unique because they can be either phobic or counterphobic. These terms come from the Greek word for fear, phobos, and they describe how anxious sixes engage their fear. Phobic sixes are by nature careful and hesitant and mistrustful. They make it very apparent to others about their worries and anxieties and are eager to find security in people, communities, or belief systems. Phobic sixes don't necessarily have phobias as classified by modern psychology, but they do tend to have an overarching fear of every possible way a situation could go wrong. Now, on the other end of that spectrum are counterphobic sixes. In comparison, they refuse to demonstrate or even admit to fear. They almost have a fear of fear itself. They might feel drawn to aggressive radical movements. They can appear robotic or emotionally detached on the surface, but they are highly independent and collected. When they are afraid of something, they run to it. According to Richard Rohr, there are two biblical representatives of six: Timothy, a phobic six, and Peter, a counterphobic six. Timothy is often mentioned in the Acts of the Apostles and in the Pauline letters. As a relatively young man, he was given the assignment by his mentor Paul of leading the community at Ephesus. Scholars dispute whether both New Testament letters came from Paul himself or were simply composed invoking his name, but at any rate, we find in these letters the beginning of a hierarchical church order. Large parts of the letters read like directives from a superior to a subordinate. While Paul's first communities were structured more democratically, with Timothy, the first traces of the modern role of pastor make an appearance. Authority over the community is given to Timothy by the laying on of hands. Timothy is also instructed to take care that the doctrine is pure and is constantly reminded to conduct himself blamelessly. The office of bishop is also mentioned for the first time in these letters. With Timothy, we see the beginnings of the church transforming from a movement to an institution. Now, Peter, the counterphobic six, is devoted to his master and ready to die for him. In moments of danger, when other people are running away, Peter runs to it. When Jesus is taken prisoner, Peter cuts off the ear of the slave of the high priest. But shortly afterward, he fails his own nerve by denying Jesus because he's afraid of being made fun of, or mocked, or beat up. We mentioned in type 1 the confrontation at Antioch when we talked about the Apostle Paul. This is a typical collision between a reformer, type 1, and a person who is loyal to the structure or the institution. We see these clashes throughout history. It was a great achievement of the early church that both of these men's followers made themselves capable of compromise. Peter wasn't always cowardly. There are numerous indications that in very dangerous situations, he could be really brave. When the high council orders him not to speak about Jesus anymore, he says, "Whether it is right in the sight of God to listen to you rather than God, you must judge, for we cannot but speak of what we have seen and heard." Later, he repeats this by saying, we must obey God rather than any human authority. The invitation to health for sixes is found in faith, breaking free from external direction and authority and taking over responsibility for their own lives and feelings. In doing this, they must look fear in the eye and call it by name. By nature, sixes prefer a form of spirituality that is structured, but they benefit most from a spiritual life that helps them develop both a unique and personal trust in God and in themselves. Along with Timothy and Peter, we can find examples of six in fictional and famous people. Phobic sixes include Ellen DeGeneres, Bob Newhart, Jon Stewart, Bilbo Baggins, and Peeta Mellark from the Hunger Games. Counterphobic sixes are Carrie Fisher, Spike Lee, and Richard Pryor. We've described the six in broad brushstrokes, but remember, each Enneagram type contains variations. Sixes teach us the value of courage, intuition, loyalty, and critical thinking. Sixes show us how to live with our fears, read the room, and ask tough questions. Thank God for sixes. Join us tomorrow as we explore the next point on the Enneagram, 7, the enthusiast. In the meantime, check out the resources for six that we've provided in the newsletter and in the description below. Thanks for watching, and see you tomorrow.